All right. Now I take the little code and I'm just going to mute that. Okay. And I'm going to come over here. And then we will get underway. Thank you for your patience. All righty. So we are ready to rock and roll. Where is my screen with Dr. Lemke? There she is. Okay, so hi, I'm here. Hi, Angelica. But I'm here with Dr. Lemke. This is NDs for Truth, Season 2, Episode number 4. And I'll give a little spiel about you, okay? And then we could get talking. We can get talking. So Angelica Lemke, ND, is a homeopath and naturopathic doctor who specializes in chronic complex cases, from recovering cases of ASD to building the immune system of people with Lyme and PANDAS. She works with clients from all over the world over the phone or video from her home in Ashland, Oregon, as well as supervising the work of new homeopaths through her group practice, the Homeopathy Hive. She has also written Healing Complex Children with Homeopathy, which is a book I have right here, which is, there we go, very, very nice book, which has received widespread positive review and can be found at the website, which you can see below the description. So currently, Angelica is focusing on teaching her 2-year deep dive course on homeopathy for complex pediatrics, as well as a post-grad course for professional homeopaths. Angelica has a naturopathic medicine degree from Bastyr University and completed 4 years of training with the New England School of Homeopathy, NESH. She has attended workshops and studied the homeopathic teachings of Rajan Sankaran and Jan Scholten. She received her undergraduate degree from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. in 2000. So welcome, Dr. Lemke.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet and to share with naturopathic doctors that are passionate about homeopathy. It's one of my favorite, modalities that we have.
Yeah, I've gone full into it. I would say I'm more of a homeopath than a naturopath in a way. But I was that way in school. I was one of those homeopathy geeks. I did 9 homeopathy clinical shifts. So I think we have 20 clinical shifts overall. So almost half of them for me were homeopathy.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't know that you could do that. And at CCNM, when I graduated, we had a certain number of hours that we had to do, like a quota.
Yeah, you could add in all these optional shifts. If I could do a shift, and then there were these like offsite clinics. And if it was an offsite clinic that was homeopathy, we did that. And while the program wasn't so flushed out at Bastyr, I made the most out of it. And I really took it to heart that we needed to specialize while we were in school. And from my very first homeopathy class, I was just in love with the medicine and knew it was what I wanted to go deep in. And I just had a trip to Europe and met a bunch of European homeopaths. And I just love the quirky, eclectic world of homeopathy so much.
It is pretty quirky. And it could and eclectic. It could be very hardcore classical, and it could be very quirky and kind of getting outside the box. I was the same way, actually. After my first course, I fell in love with homeopathy, and I was studying it like 70 to 90% of the time. And the rest was like the 10% was to squeeze in all the other classes just to get by. But I always had all my books open, and it's a fascinating medicine when you really touch base with it.
And I think if you have that heart for it and that kind of belief in it, you attract the results. And so for me, being in the student clinic and having an amazing supervisor, I saw incredible results in those shifts that kept me going forward. And you have your frustrations with homeopathy, and then you have that wonderful miracle that keeps you going. And for me, my passion was, how can I make my percent cures go from 20% to 90% to 100%? And every case, gets harder and harder, or you're tracked in cases that you need to learn from. And it was my philosopher's stone. It was really the work for me, and working with complex kids and autism and nonverbal kids built my intuition, my faith in myself. And it just brought in my own alchemy. I mean, it's a spiritual practice, really, being able to help people with homeopathy. And then the way that I kind of what I fell into along the way, which was a really heart-based, intuitive style of practice.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like, when you're working with kids that are pre-verbal or non-verbal, as you said, you have to develop other senses. You have to become sensitized. It's like someone who can't see, their sense of smell and their sense of hearing really augments. So you really reach out. Like, how did you develop your intuition in these cases?
Surrender. And so the problem with naturopathic school is that you're made to think that you have to have all the answers, that you have to study, you have to be in your brain, you have to think a lot, you have to take tons of notes and have it all on your computer. And that when that person, you have that case and they're coming, you're like, I know what this is. I know what I'm going to do. And you kind of jump to the chase constantly with your brain, and it's like, and then by the time the person's finished telling their story, you've got the whole treatment plan. And then that fails at some point. What you think fails you. You can only go so far with piecemealing a highly complex case. You've got cases where there's 30 pages of an intake form and a nonverbal kid, and they give you 10 lab tests, and and then in the intake they're hysterical. You can't figure out what is truth, what is not, right? And so, as smart as you are, as much as you think you don't know jack, right? Because you're not helping this person because it's so hard. So what do?
Well, that's what you're describing is the way the colleges have gotten, where they're not really, the students aren't really prepared for practice. You're just getting a whole bunch of formulaic, this for that kind of allopathic medicine. But when we're talking about homeopathy is based it's got a huge learning curve, right? There's people that practice homeopathy, I could include myself in this, and they will be practicing for 20 years, 15, 20 years before they really start to get a feel for the medicine, because it's a giant. Homeopathy is a giant. So, but there is knowledge, which is not just in homeopathy, it's not just knowledge that's useless, which I might consider a lot of the knowledge that naturopathic students are learning today in terms of really helping people. There's good knowledge in homeopathy. Where do you find the balance with that?
Yeah. So there's left brain and right brain, right? All the knowledge is the kind of left brain stuff. And we don't really get taught about intuition or using our right brain, being creative with our practice. The protocol stuff is boring. I mean, even the standard homeopathic intake of asking all these questions for an hour and a half can get really boring and exhausting. I want to be in the realm of creativity and wonder and excitement when I'm every day taking a case and what's going to come up, and so, and that's why I say surrender. And so my first surrender happened when I was treating a child with seizures. And these mothers that I would work with autism and complex disorders, they sob, they cry, they're heartbroken. They feel like they're seeing their child die every day when they regress. As a woman, and I'm sure as a compassionate ND like yourself, it's heartbreaking. We can't be dispassionate, clinical people, I'd cry when I would hear these regressions and these stories. And I would get really caustic of me, like Ignatia, like, oh my God, like, I can't believe this has happened, really like wound up and over idealistic. And so my heart was fully in the game. When I was like, I am with you, mama. Like, I feel what you feel, because you legitimately are heartbroken over the loss of your child.
Mhm.
And so I remember I was in my parents' basement and I was trying to treat this child, and I was just like, I have no idea what to do. And I just said, God, tell me what to do. As simple as that. I have no
Mm.
idea, meaning I am taking my ego out of the game
Yes.
and I'm putting all my heart in the game. And then I just started muscle testing my arm and getting like answers. And honestly, I don't think that I'm particularly talented at intuition. I really truly believe that intuition is our God given GPS that everybody has. Every thing in nature, every bird knows when to fly south. Everything in nature has its own GPS. We all, to be alive, have a heart. Our heart is this huge electromagnetic frequency generator. Our
Yes.
heart, our bodies, like, they know the truth, right? And so NDs for truth, get out of your heads, get into your bodies, get embodied. You want to like become a more intuitive naturopath, go dancing, do what you want to do to like be more in your body. Connect inward to like your own pain, your own sensations, heal your own stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got great answers, and like really my homeopathic practice is pretty out of the box. I mean, it's on the foundation of classical homeopathy. I'm still all about the totality remedy, and
Because you have training, right? Like when you it sounds to me like basically if somebody has no foundation in homeopathy, you can't teach them homeopathy with intuition because they have no basis for it unless you're teaching them a very advanced intuition, which I think very few people possess, that they can be purely listening and hearing the voice of God, say, right?
it isn't completely true that you can't, because I've known and heard of a lot of people doing healing with homeopathy having very little basis in it, asking for guidance, like using a pendulum, or like the remedy comes to them. And somebody told me that the Amish use homeopathy and pendulums in order to find their remedies. So it's like, yeah, we with all of our training, and oh my God, I've got all these cool tools and my repertories and all my books. Like, I don't want to diminish that and diminish my egoic like building up by just saying, oh, but I could just use this thing that tells me the remedy. But I do have to say that I love the left brain stuff. I have a million books. I love all the maps. I love the periodic table. I love like Mikhail Yakir's plant charts. I just bought 12 books from Rosina Sonnenschmidt's like organ systems, and I'm every night reading homeopathy. So homeopathy provides those mental maps for intuition, but surrendering to intuition and an intuitive case taking where you are saying, okay, I heard the story entered my mind, now I want to do a heart based intake. I'm just going to like let go of what I think I know, and we're going to dive into the subconscious. And I have people close their eyes and do a meditation into themselves, which is really like the sensation process, but it's kind of my own sensation process.
Yes.
And that often just gives you such a whole new level of reality. And for me, it's a more truthful level of reality coming from that subconscious depth.
Well, I think that any naturopath that's been trained to not be afraid of intuition, like when you speak to some of the old timers, they all regarded intuition as a basic part of practice. And so it's not like anything new. I think what's happened is that we've been taught to distrust ourselves. We've been so the error, when I say we, I'm speaking about the profession. The profession has been so drawn into the egoic fear of appearing like witch doctors and uncredible, not credible, that we've sold the soul of our medicine to gain credibility. So,
but it's discrediting the medicine by not being as effective as it could be.
right.
We can, the effectiveness comes from my spirit, my soul that I'm in touch with, intuitively touching the spirit and soul of that other person and allowing that relationship to guide us forward and heal not only the patient, but have the patient heal us. It's a two-way relationship a lot of the time.
For sure.
So,
I do teach that in my program of holistic counseling, that, and also the great orchestrator, AKA the Vis, the healing power of nature, God, brings the patient to us. That's also very reflective of where we are. And so we need that same healing. It's like a 2 for the price of 1 instead of just the patient benefiting. Definitely.
Yeah. So when you get stuck in your practice, you're kind of stuck in your own healing. When you're stuck in your practice, you're stuck in your own learning. And so what is it that you need to heal in yourself? What do you need to learn? And when I say stuck in your practice, I feel like people can get in a rut. You can get into like being burned out, or you're seeing the same types of clients over and over, or you're like not able to work through a set of issues with people. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And that like treats like is the law of attraction, is synchronicity, is homeopathy. And so life is all of that.
Right. Right. You and I, we've chatted a little bit about astrology and stuff like that, like having different knowledge levels of astrology, because that's another example of something that you could go into and learn the basics and then use your intuition, or you can really study the details like incredibly. I have a friend who was studying astrology, and she was reading a book on Neptune. It was 750 pages, Neptune in each degree and relationship with every single planet, what it might look like. Very, very knowledge, very heady based. And then there's also stuff that you could do with your left brain as well. Sorry, with your intuition. I just want to ask you something. You were saying that, so you pray, so here you are, you're in this case, you have no idea what to do, been there, done that, especially after just the program that naturopathic medicine taught me in homeopathy. Like I wasn't equipped for my cases. It's very, very helpful to have a skilled clinician practitioner to help you, to guide you through your first few years of practice. Everybody should have the privilege of having that. So I was also lost, but you mentioned using muscle testing. Now that's to me a little different from just straight up intuition. And same with a pendulum. That's a kind of scrying, using different techniques to.
I don't think it's different from intuition. I think it's just a tool, and I don't actually use a pendulum. I just. It's cranial sacral is something I studied in school, and that was something that Bastyr had a really good program in. And I'm so grateful that I had cranial sacral along with homeopathy, because it allowed me to really start to suss out the relaxation versus the stress responses in the body, the contraction versus the expansion, the yes versus the no. And when I first started practicing homeopathy in New York State, which is unlicensed, I went to New York State because I wanted to be in an unlicensed state. I didn't want to feel the stress of having to do like regular general practice naturopathic medicine. But I would take the homeopathic case, find the remedies, then have somebody put the remedies on their body, and then I would just feel it, or I would ask them to feel the remedies, and so you have remedies are like energetic information, and we have different responses to them. So that started me off down that path of intuitive testing, in a sense of having like, not so much, or yes, this is really good, and there's so many things, if you go down the rabbit hole of muscle testing, there's people out there that, say that you can muscle test with your nostrils, like letting your nostril flares indicate something, or,
Yes.
there's a million types of things to do. So for me, it's just a way to gauge your yes response.
Okay. Okay, I hear you. I mean, I have studied some muscle testing, applied kinesiology. I'm not a big fan of it just because I've seen a lot of people, there's a lot of confirmation bias there. And any kind of intuitional tool is really restricted or limited to the person's own ability to surrender to God, to surrender to the divine intelligence that lives inside of all of us. And I know that does. But for me, like the development of intuition, it takes time, it takes training. It's not just like, and I think, let's say we look at the idea of intuition in practice. You're going to have results based on where you are. It's not like intuition is this magical energy that everybody can immediately tap into and get great results with. You have to develop it as well. And it is.
You develop it mostly through having some level of trust, right? And what better way to develop it than in your homeopathic, naturopathic practice, where you're constantly getting feedback, And so every time that I would kind of go into that intuitive place and get that positive feedback response, I just do it more. And, for me, healing is opening myself up to the intuitive. And what the intuitive is opening myself up to myself as love. Because it's that heart-based guidance that is love,
Yes.
and so with some of these cases, you feel like this is impossible. But I truly believe that there is always a step forward that's positive, and we can always be guided in that direction. And we don't have to look outside of ourselves. It doesn't mean that I'm like extending my aura or my energy out into the cosmos to connect to some like entity out there. Not at all. I'm connecting to my own heart and my own expanded self that's connected to everybody in the world. That's the Sophia, it's the wisdom that's all knowing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I use intuition deeply in practice. It's embedded in my practice, but a lot of that has grown with time from experience and also from knowledge. Like for me, because as you know about me, I practice alchemy. I studied alchemy. For me, the magic happens from the balance of the masculine and the feminine. You can do either extreme without the other. You can just be strictly feminine. Let's say strictly intuitive, whatever, strictly heart. You could also be strictly knowledge and not even listen to your intuition. And both you can get results when you study the medicine from the left, let's say. But for me, I've always been very interested in the balance of opposites. And so for me, intuition makes sense. And what is sensical will also feel right. And the two really work together. I've developed that through years of practice and through years of experience.
So an example of that is I repertorize almost every day. I've got my like MAC rep here. I repertorize, and then I look at the remedies and I just feel, I'm like, what feels right? I'm like, okay, this is an odd symptom. What feels right? I need to prescribe on the spot. I've got somebody with kidney stones, and, it's my gardener has kidney stones, and like, I can't take his case. I'll repertorize kidney stones on the spot. And then I'll just kind of intuit down the list. Boom. I gave him Philaspe bursa pastoris. Is that how you say it?
Yeah. Shepherd's purse.
shepherd's purse and he's better. It's like, oh, good. I didn't have to take his case, So that was a combination of like, oh, I used a software program and I used my intuition. So yeah, and healing sometimes requires digging, and it requires a lot on behalf of the person. Oftentimes we as practitioners are not meant to be the healers in the situation. And that in fact, giving that person the remedy or the cure actually disempowers their healing. And so you have to listen to your intuition. So I could have somebody coming to me for a homeopathic remedy and my intuition says, don't give them anything. Because if you give them something, they're going to think you're the person to heal them. And that's not going to heal them because their healing needs to come from within themselves. And so I just tell them that truth, It doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened before.
Sure.
And yeah,
that's something that I experience a lot because I use, I really love using homeopathy with the holistic counseling that I teach and that I practice. And there are many cases where I get very deep with the patient and they have a release by recognizing their belief that is at the source of their suffering.
Yeah.
And after
exactly. Oftentimes it's like the person themselves, like you might have the light to peer into that person to figure out what's wrong, but they need to generate the light within them to look at their own stuff.
Yeah.
And then
exactly.
once they kind of peel that, that trap door, that door inside of them, and they look within and they see it themselves, it's always available to them.
Yeah. And I don't like to, what I was going to say before is that when they've had this beautiful healing, if I say, even though it's homeopathy, we're not giving a supplement, we're not giving a drug, we're not saying you need this because you're deficient. We're saying this is your mirror from nature to neutralize your disharmony in your vital force, right? So if I say here, and here's your remedy, they can get locked onto that. Like that's the answer to the.
And this is the problem, honestly, with like classical constitutional homeopathy that bothers me, is that people like take that constitutional to define themselves. And it's like, you're not that. It's not like, right. Oh, you're Lycopodium, so you are moss, and then you're that for like the rest of your life. That doesn't make sense.
No, definitely not the rest of your life. And definitely like that definition, it's exactly the opposite. You are not that. That's what you're not.
Exactly. But this is what people perceive. And, I hear a lot of stories of people. Some
people.
A classical homeopath to hear, oh, I know my constitutional remedy, so I don't need to seek out homeopathy anymore because they told me what it is. It's like getting your like sun sign, and it's like.
Right. Yeah. I've taken cases where that after a year and a half, I had a case of someone that was on a 1M every day for like 8 months straight with no change. And every time she would go back for a follow-up, the response was the same. No, wait, it's the right remedy. No, it's the right remedy. And I think that we, all of us, every single person on the planet, we do have the ability to deceive ourselves. And so we need some discernment and watchful eyes on ourselves as well. And yeah, I don't think we should be like a dog with a bone.
Right.
One thing, Jan Scholtens, who I dearly love and admire, I find him like full of light. And I enjoyed studying with him. One of the things he said, because he's a little bit of a bad boy of homeopathy, he does what the other homeopaths won't do. So he likes to play outside of the box. And for instance, he gives his patients coffee to drink while they're on their remedies to make sure that's the right remedy. Or another thing that he did was that he, what was this that I was going to talk about? I forget right now. Anyway, I forget. Hopefully it'll come back to me. But Jan, I forget. It's a really good point. Anyway, Jan, you've studied with Jan as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I see him as like a bad boy of homeopathy. I think he's a genius, and I think he's given a whole new breath of fresh air to contemporary homeopathy, which is what I teach in my program, which has naturopaths in it as well. And in my first kind of section, I teach the periodic table of elements because it provides a framework for understanding a lot of like miasms in plants and just the whole cycle of life and deterioration. I mean, it's quite profound. But yes, he did a lot of his provings. I mean, if you have his plants book, which has like thousands of plants in it, he did like so many of those provings himself by just taking a bath and going inward and asking for guidance. And so he actually is highly intuitive, but doesn't talk that much about it either. And this
Well,
is
he must be intuitive because he saw in nature's patterns. And I think that's a combination of intuitive and being intuitive and creative and just inspired, like being very inspired.
Yes,
Like
yes,
super inspired.
yes, and he's creative, and that brings me inspiration too. And so I would teach Jan Schulten's periodic table anytime, every time. I get excited about it. I super geek out. I want to show people the periodic table.
Are you talking about for the elements and the plants, or just the elements right now?
Okay, so for the elements, it's excellent. His
Yeah.
system for the plants is a little bit like, oh my gosh, it's a little hard. It gets over rational. I think his provings are really great, but the whole numbering system is so convoluted that most people just didn't pick it up and understand it. And I took his seminar when he was teaching that, and he did not figure out how to like teach it at that
Right.
point. I still consult his book, but Michal Yakir, who's an Israeli homeopath, she actually integrated his information into her book. And I see her book as kind of like the next level plants book. And plants are much more feminine. Plants are yin. They're the essence of, the cool yin aspect of nature. And I think that I like categorizing plants by families and the qualities of families,
Yes.
but it's not so linear according to the evolution of plants, which is what Jan Schulten tried to create a system around. Michal Yakir, I hope that your listeners can geek out on this stuff. So Michal Yakir really developed like this amazing system of categorizing plants that is based on the evolution of plants, but from masculine to feminine, from feminine to masculine, from the watery place, the oceanic mother place of realistically water in the ocean, towards the more contained, self-identified flowers like the asters. And so,
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't encountered her work. I could tell you I could see what you're saying relative perhaps to minerals. Plants would be more, maybe, I don't know exactly. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about that sometime, but
it's just multidimensional. I mean, when you have
inside the plant kingdom, you have, I mean, anywhere from very Saturnine, very solar, very masculine plants to very feminine, very lunar plants, right? So that kingdom itself is split between the yin and the yang as well, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. So cool. I find that there's like the periodic table, it makes sense that you could categorize elements in rows and columns, because that's kind of where they sit with the number of free electrons in their outer shells, et cetera, et cetera. They share these processes, but trying to cram a plant into a stage and a column, I think is restrictive. It doesn't
resonate.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so a lot of his descriptions are like, this plant is really about this stage because it's about, being stable within the family. And it's really kind of defined by various relationships and kind of within that structured mindset of the periodic table. Whereas Michalyak here is kind of integrating a lot more, folklore. I mean, there's other people. Franz Vermeulen has this like 4-book volume on plants that's unbelievable and has all the folklore and history, and
I love
it's
that.
incredible. But yeah, I'm loving her book, Wondrous Order.
Yeah,
it's right here. It's a big one.
Whoa, nice. About provings, I think we chatted about this once a while ago. And the proving, so there's different ways of getting proving. You could sit like Jan does in his bathtub with a substance and get information, but you're definitely going to lose not lose, but you're going to miss out on some of the clinical stuff or some of the pathology and also symptoms that you just can't predict, just weird anomalies. The basis of homeopathy is, one of them is strange, rare, peculiar symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just not going to, there are certain things you're not going to know, like digitalis. If you're sitting there with digitalis purpurea in the bathtub, you're getting information about it, fine. But the proving and the clinical symptoms, like there's some things that I don't think you could imagine, or you couldn't.
Well, I think you need again both left and right brain, because if say, okay, so I have a remedy right here that
I agree with that. I agree with that. Like what I'm saying is that if you exclude, or we're not doing the classical form of proving, we're going to miss things that you just cannot. I don't think you can get unless you allow that substance to impact the human being and to express symptoms at the mental, emotional, and physical levels.
Yes, you can't have an unflawed proving. It's impossible. So we have to let go of like that there's a perfect proving out there, and that there are a million styles of provings, and provings aren't just for developing materia medica. People do provings as well for their own self-development, for their own. What I've really learned is like, the trituration proving is about meditating with the substance, a kind of like sacred plant alchemy that you can do to really energetically engage with that material for your own benefit, your own healing, and healing the collective. Because as you move through each trituration, you get higher and higher. You're not just developing materia medica, you're actually experiencing a healing in the moment for yourself, the group, and the collective. So, I think it's kind of like the word homeopathy almost gets too broadly used. The word proving gets too broadly used because there's so many ways that we can experience these substances. You can meditate on them in a bath, or you can this is a tincture of lobster mushroom that somebody picked, and I ate a small piece of this lobster mushroom, and I had the craziest dream. I woke up and I was like, this medicine's going to heal something in me, like make a tincture out of it. And I'm going to just drop dose it for a while just to see physically what comes up for me. And then I'm going to do a trituration with Dr. Chris, and and then I had people look at the mushroom itself. I was like, what does this remind you of? Like doctrine of signatures. And I got 5 people to look and smell at this mushroom and then tell me what it was about. And they were just like, I wrote it all down, and so it's so cool.
And did you see like a pattern in what those 5 people wrote?
Yeah, everybody, because it looks like rotting flesh and it smells fishy. It has a real disgusting decay quality to it. And so, and actually the shape of it, Chris Lebowski was like, this looks like a really infected uterus or eardrum. It had like the shape of the mushroom itself. Yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of embrace it all.
Yeah.
That's what I do. My all is my initials, ALL. So I like to embrace it all.
Yeah, I like to embrace it all too. I think it's wise to embrace it all. I think it's also good to have discernment, so that the methods that we are using, we have to be discerning, because I've seen so many people and I could speak for myself as well, like really identifying with something through the years and saying, this is it. But then you realize down the road, okay, maybe I wasn't so balanced, or maybe I was a little out there with my thinking. So I think we do need to have discernment. It's a nice balance. And that is kind of a nice yin yang balance, discernment being quite masculine and being very, very open to all possibilities is very yin, very feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So an example that I think of is like your gemstone books, your new age, your typical crystal Bibles, and you read about them and they're like kind of channeled information. They're all about like opening this and that chakra.
Yeah.
But recently they've been making more and more headway in homeopathy with gemstone provings. And I love homeopathic gemstone provings because they really have the more of the physical qualities of what they do, and they have the negative aspects, the negative attributes fleshed out. The homeopathy really specializes actually in the negative attributes.
It's basically all negative, really.
Right.
Like we're looking for the pathology. Sometimes there's positive qualities that come from, being in that field.
Right. Right. And so these gemstone provings that are kind of coming up nowadays are really powerful, and they're so needed right now because the gemstones are really an important category for shifting the deep, deep structural issues, the like unshiftable ancestral structural pieces. So yeah.
Cool. Yes. I love it. I love it. So, yeah, I mean, also there's remedies that I've seen, like the times that they're proven, the times that they come into the collective field of homeopathy, which therefore translates into humanity, have been very apropos. Like very sensitive homeopaths are like, okay, channeled, maybe they're guided, maybe they're intellectually deciding this is maybe a good substance that we should take a look at now, and they'll do a proving on that.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I do is I have a homeopathic dispensary, and other practitioners use it as well. And I get to see like what the collective of homeopaths are ordering, and there are these trends, and certain times, certain remedies are like really coming up. People are really big into mega potency starting from this summer, meaning like, CM, MM, 10 MM of like well-known remedies like Ignatia, Staphysagria, and Natmur, for moving very deep, deep ancestral stuff, and
wow.
So yeah, it is really cool. And like Ton Janssen, who's this like Dutch homeopath, he's developing materia medica for like standard drugs like steroids and insulin and birth control and or like nosodes that we don't have a lot of information about. HPV, his little keynote for HPV is letting the lie in. Just like, I think is really like, ooh, that's just dark.
Right. And that sounds very appropriate for the pandemic that's occurred in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So with your method, you have these little kids, they have pathology, you use your intuition, it sounds like you're using tools like muscle testing, and you're using your knowledge, and you're having good results with, like you were mentioning, like, I want to go from 20% to 90% to 100%,
Yeah. I mean, of course there's cases that I can't fix, but I was starting with ASD, and you can recover ASD cases with homeopathy. The younger the kids, the easier. The harder the kid, the older the kids, the harder. It depends on what healing is defined as. I've gotten cases completely better, but except for the nonverbal part. And the nonverbal part is a learned thing that the kid has to go through. And then for many years, I just saw tons and tons of pandas and pans and then Lyme. And yeah, it wasn't too hard for me to turn around pandas cases. There are aspects to a lot of these kids cases where you have to heal the whole family, and that complicates things. The child
Yeah.
is representing the unhealed aspects of the parents, and so then you're accepting one kid client, and when you're really accepting like a whole family of 5 people, and I started being able to like prescribe for like 4 people on the spot instead of one person on the spot because I just had to. So yeah, I feel like I had good enough results for my patients to be like beg me to teach them, I didn't want to go down the path of being like, oh, the homeopath that specializes in kids and stuff like that. It was my own ego resistance. It's silly, like, right? But eventually, like, the universe kicked me in the butt and said, stop just hanging out at the beach and do what you're supposed to do on this planet and create a course. And the way that all unfolded was so divinely orchestrated. I had about 20 moms that were just like, you have to teach us. And partly because the style of healing that I did was intuitive and feminine, and they were going to homeopathy programs that were super rigid and just didn't fit in with their experience with homeopathy. So they wanted to learn from me. And I, my laziness was like, I don't want to. But it all came together. I put all of my learned information into a set of charts, which end up becoming my book. And like, what was so incredible was after my first series of classes, which lasted 2.5 years, and I had like a 2-year-old, I was like, I'm done. I'm retiring. Like, I practiced for 9 years. I've done a 2-year course. I've got a little kid here. I want to just like make cakes and like just, garden and stuff. And nope. Like the universe, was just like, it sent me actually a client or a patient who was like, can you teach your course again? I really want to take it. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't know. It's such a huge commitment. Another 2 years. I don't know if I can do that. And she's like, please, I'll find the students. I'm like, okay, fine. Like I made a 1-page flyer and she got me 40 students,
Wow.
like in a month. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to do this. Those students, one of them was a well-established book editor who had like written and edited multiple books, including the Western Garden Guide, so complicated books. And the other one was a textbook publisher. And so I was like, the first editor was like, you've got to write all your stuff into a book. And I'm like, okay, you help me out. And it just, what was a complicated process, which is writing a book that is a whole materia medica of complex kids, which felt overwhelming to me, just unfolded organically and naturally. And then once we had the manuscript, we're like, well, how are we going to publish it? The publisher showed up. They said, hey, I heard you wrote a book. Can I publish it? So
That's
it was
cool.
really sweet.
You're talking about this book, right?
Yeah, that surrender, that kind of surrender, means that, you just kind of wait for things to show up and they will. You shouldn't have to like work that hard. Even though it was hard work, what was meant to be just kind of fell into place. So
yeah,
I'm really grateful for that, this whole journey.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful when you have things fall into your plate like that, when things manifest and they just show up and stuff.
Oh gosh.
That's
Yeah, it
really-
totally happened to us when we moved to Ashland and like we wanted to build a house. Like land showed up, a financer showed up, like everything just has showed up. And that is trust. That is the trust within the heart that believes that the answer will show up. The same with prescribing in life. It's trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's big. That's big. I mean, I know I've had some experiences with mentors, which I think, I agree with them to a certain extent. I think everybody's different. Everybody has different levels of skill. Like everybody can play hockey, for instance, but not everybody's going to be a Wayne Gretzky, or everybody that plays hockey is not going to be an amazing playmaker, setter up, or genius on the ice. Some of them might be like grunty hitting people.
Yeah.
Everybody has their niche. And, when I was in clinic, I chose a remedy and I was like, this is the remedy, and the doctor asked me, it was actually, who was it? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on the name. So maybe it's not meant to be for me to say it right now, but I really, oh yes, Miller, John Miller. I really love this guy. He's a great homeopath, very creative, beautiful perception of the remedies. I don't think what you would call a very like dry and boring kind of homeopathic type. And I said, this is the remedy I want to give. I think it was Anacardium orientalis. And he said, why? He asked me why. And I said, because this, and because my intuition is telling me this is right. And he said, you don't have the knowledge or the experience to trust your intuition. What do you think about that?
I think that's an unfair statement.
Okay.
If he said that to me, I'd be like, screw you. I mean, when people are like, my intuition really says that, I think undermining people's intuition is one of the worst things you can do to disempower someone. So I think that was a little bit of like, I don't know. It's nothing that I would ever say to someone. That's just
right. Well, I'll tell you something. I think he was right. And I would not want to disempower somebody to listen to their intuition. But I think it is fair to say, like when I was talking about a remedy in a case, I have no experience about it. I have no knowledge about this, not a lot of knowledge about this remedy. My intuition is telling it to me. And sure, he's supervising. So he could, for instance, say, yeah, go ahead. But it's his responsibility to coach. And in this case, I agree with him. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I wouldn't want to squash somebody's intuition. But I don't think he was squashing my intuition by saying, look, you don't have the knowledge or the experience to trust your intuition unless that person has pure clarity of intuition. And I think that's a very rare gift that people have. I think it's very rare for somebody to have pure intuition that they can just, without knowledge, without experience, just go boom.
Well, I don't have experience so much in a student clinic, but I have a ton of experience with mothers. And if there's one thing that mothers need is to be empowered in their intuitive self. From an extreme point of view, their intuitive connection to their body has been stripped away through the generations. I mean, humanity has stripped away women's intuition in a awful, from witchcraft trials and worse onward, right? And so to the point where mothers are handing their kids over to healers that are destroying the health of these children, and they do it over and over again, discounting their own intuition. This upsets me. This is not something you can rationalize out of the way. Like for me, I want to empower people's intuition. Number one, for me, it's more important than even homeopathy, because if you have your intuition, you know what diet to do, you know what relationships to make, you know where to live, you know what practitioners to go to, you know what remedies to give, you know how often to give a remedy, you know what potency to give a remedy, and you trust. And
you had me on all those things until you bring in the homeopathy. You had me on, what relationships to be in, what foods are good for you. But when you jump into, what remedies to give, there are thousands of remedies. Are you going to
stand? You're stuck in your head with it. You're stuck in your head with it. Like,
No, I'm saying, I'm just speaking factually here.
Mhm.
In a given case, let's say, we have at our fingertips thousands of remedies.
And an issue is that people think that only one remedy is the answer, when it isn't necessarily only one remedy is.
But I'm not saying one remedy is the answer.
Right.
I'm saying that, how do they know? Like, okay, intuition. So if you give them a list and you teach them how to feel what's right, let's say on a list of 50 remedies.
Mm-hmm.
So then, okay, I can get that. Or you teach them 30, you teach them all the polycrests, maybe 30 to 50 remedies. And then you say, okay, now you're going to look at all these remedies. You're going to repertorize maybe one or two rubrics, and then you're going to trust your heart and you're going to go with that. But what I'm saying is, I have seen people that can intuit a remedy that have no knowledge of that remedy. So they receive the sound and they hear the word and they've never heard of it before. And they say, I don't know, pulsatilla nigrans. That's a very common remedy, but they don't even know the remedy. They don't even know the Latin, what it means. And they're channeling that. That is very rare. So how do these people know they get a remedy? I guess that's where I'm saying I'm a little lost in this process. Where, by the way, and Angelica, I understand what you're saying about women being divorced, but it's not just women; it's men too. It's humanity being divorced from intuition and not to trust that. And even like God is a dirty word in naturopathic medicine and science. So I'm with you on that. But it sounds like what you really want to do is you want to help heal people to be trusting their intuition.
Right.
That's really what you want to do. You said that's number one.
Number one.
Yeah.
And what really frustrates me is spending, I have a case that I spent years on, like using my intuition to help heal a, fairly disabled autistic girl. We did nutrition, we did, supplements, biomed, we did, like non-homeopathic things too, drainage and homeopathy. We did so much. She got to a really good point, and then they didn't see me for like 3 or 4 years. And she's just regressed so much because the mom doesn't follow her intuition. She just relied on me as a crutch for that. And that's so frustrating for me. And I think a lot of naturopathic medicine can be like that. The truth of naturopathic medicine is that people are paying you to rely on your skills, and then they can get better and they can walk away and get worse again. And so that they're told that in order to get better, they have to keep shelling out money to some other healer out there, and so but the naturopath is healer, the doctor is healer, to do docere, right? That for me is ultimate. Jesus was an ultimate healer, but he quit healing because he was like, I don't want all these people coming to me with all their problems. I'm just going to teach them. They should know how to do this themselves.
Right. That's so important. Yeah. And there's a total disconnect from the healing power of nature, how it speaks, how it comes from within us. And that's so important to get that back in touch. I do really agree with you on that 100%. And I think that's a beautiful endeavor. Everybody should trust their intuition. I mean, look what's happened there. How divorced, because any parent should have this primal instinct of not just loving their child, but protecting them from harm, right?
Right.
No, you're not going to run out into the street. No. And I would think that, I mean, just what's gone on over the last few years alone, not to mention all the years before that, and all the stories of parents just lamenting that they didn't listen to their intuition, and they didn't want that intervention to happen with their kid, but they allowed it to happen because doctor said this and that, or there was pressure, or there was fear. They didn't listen to their instinct to protect their child from that. And then their child is terribly.
Yeah, that intervention often being vaccines. I mean, if this is NDs for truth, it only took me half a year in practice to recognize how many of these kids are regressed after vaccines. And so
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And they didn't trust their intuition.
Right.
I salute you, and I salute anybody that is on the path to help people to trust their intuition.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. I just think, I've said what I feel about that in terms of homeopathy, just because it's vast. Not that you can't teach somebody how to use their intuition. It's part of the medicine, very much so. But it's also, I'm a big fan of the knowledge itself and training and having the elder help you understand some of the pieces of wisdom. There's a lot of study involved, and
yeah. And I think you're looking at extremes a little bit too in this conversation. Like, I'm not looking to just train people to get immediate channeled information all the time. My 2.5-year program is deeper than your average homeopathic program out there. So people get upset at me for teaching moms how to practice homeopathy. And it's like, I'm not just telling people to just pendulum with a materia medica. I'm like teaching 17 weeks of the periodic table of elements. Right now I'm teaching, 5 months on miasms, weekly. I have 3 lectures on miasms, nosos, tautopathy, isopathy. I mean, you're learning information from me that you're not getting. I mean, Paul Hirsute didn't teach streptococcinum, Coxsackie, COVID nosodes, these are things that we need nowadays. And
well, that's great. Like, all the power to you.
Yeah, I'm creating cycles for what is the viral cycle? What is the bacterial cycle? And what does it mean when you detox MMR, and what do you do about it? What do you do about it to support the detox? And it's very practical. I mean, there's some really, we can get really esoteric, but there's some pretty practical information in homeopathy that just goes beyond prescribing one remedy. Most of these complex cases are going to need a lot more than a single remedy.
Right.
That's just practical.
Sure. Or perhaps we could say that in some cases, it's very hard to find that one remedy. There might be one remedy that can resolve the whole case, but it might be the strangest, littlest, most remote remedy. It's very hard to find.
Or they're just like a soric polycrest, like Natmur or Calc Carb that's gotten in some trouble. But yes, most of these cases are have every miasm deeply layered with tons of toxicity and history of steroids and birth control and all sorts of suppressive stuff. And
I totally look. I hear you much better now. I understand where you're coming from better, and I could see myself in you. I know we've had a lot of things that we resonated together.
So Albert Einstein said, in order to solve a problem, you can't solve it at the level at which it was created.
Right.
Okay, so these problems were created at a kind of a mental, rational level. I say that intuition, Albert Einstein, also a big proponent of intuition, it's just connecting you to your 5th dimensional self that has the ability to see the big picture. And when you have this complex case,
but that's asking a lot for people that are not developed at that level, though. Not everybody's developed so that they could get into their 5th level dimensional reality.
I think a lot of people that think they're really developed are the hardest people to get there. Moms, not the case, but maybe if you've spent so many years like yourself studying and studying and studying, you don't want to discount that, right? So it's not like I'm attached to that and I'm discounting intuition. I'm just saying that I think that the balance of the two is very powerful. And what I was saying before is what I understand better about you is that you're not just telling somebody to trust their intuition. That is what you sound like, though. Initially, you do sound like that. That's what that's your first foot you're putting forward. And what I'm saying is, I understand where you're coming from because of the way the world has been stacked up, where people have been taught to not trust their intuition. You're passionate about moms and women and stuff like that, and they have been taught that in the world. So I can see where you're coming from, and that's why you're very adamant about trusting your intuition. But when that's the message that someone, let's say someone like myself or someone that's very
trained in the discipline in the sense of, deep knowledge base and experience base, they might receive that as being kind of extreme or not balanced.
If you read my book, which your listeners might want to do, you'll find that balance, because my book is a lot of information. The problem with the intellectual and the over intellectualizing of homeopathy is that it turns a lot of people off, even smart people, because it's heady and imbalanced. Why are there so many sulfur lycopodium veratrum people in homeopathy, right? Because homeopathy attracts it. And and people who are more embodied, who are more herbalists, who are more like into nature, who are more intuitive, get turned off by homeopathy, and they shouldn't. But it's because of that imbalance into the information. People get overwhelmed.
But homeopathy can be that way. Here's the thing, though. There's enough out there in homeopathy. It's not just all that dry intellect without any juicy like character colorfulness. And it's not. I didn't learn that way. I learned some that way, and I derived benefit from that way. And I also derived benefit from other things. Homeopathy is not just that dry thing that you're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about books, repertories, being on the computer all the time. If you go to an average homeopathy seminar, what is it? It's sitting at a desk in front of a computer taking notes, right? It's a bit intellectual and boring. For a person who wants to be
for you, I've sat with teachers and I've been enthralled every second because look, every remedy that you can grasp is it's like a bullet in your arsenal.
You're super
right?
intellectual, but the moms that I'm teaching are different. Their access, their point of access is their physical reality of their connection to their child. And bringing them into a meditation where you are your child, how they feel. They are you, you are them. You're connected to the love that you share. That love will guide you to the right remedy, has provided an incredible pathway. There's more than one way to march up that mountain of healing, and for you, it's that way. And for a mom who's intuitive, it can be a totally other way.
But again, it's funny because you're saying for you, it's that way because you consider me intellectual. I have a very developed intellect, but I'm not strictly intellectual. I also work deeply with intuition when I'm in a case. Like my knowledge and my intuition work together. I think that's where the magic happens.
That's good for you.
Yeah, I'm just saying that for some people, if there's no intellectual basis, and you're not just teaching without intellectual basis, you are also offering the foundational points of the medicine, it seems like, to provide people a framework to work with. It's not just pure intuition.
Well, it's the framework partly because these cases are so complex. It's not like I'm just trying to help cases of ear infections. I'm trying to get moms, there's these ASD cases or these PANDAS, some of these complex kids cases. One, the moms don't have enough money to see a healer for all of their kids. They have 3 or 4 kids that have some issue. They can't afford a naturopath, but they want to have healing for their kids. And intuition and homeopathy are really beautiful, powerful tools for that. And so
what do you mean? Because you could see a lot of people quickly and you don't have to take a lot of time on a case?
For moms themselves being able to heal their own kids.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to figure out a constitutional remedy, maybe an isopathic vaccine clear, maybe, they're trying to kind of figure out what trauma did I go through during delivery? What's a remedy that could be useful for that? I have moms take each other's cases, and it's really an attempt to provide something grassroots, that's affordable for the huge barrage deluge of illness that's coming towards us.
Right.
And
that's good. That's good. I think
it's an unreasonable expectation for people to think that the amount of homeopaths, like just the sheer capacity of healthcare providers, is going to be able to meet that need.
Right. I think it's a good thing to train people, to show them how to use homeopathy. Like we moved out here to Tennessee, and already we have like 2 moms ordering kits and learning homeopathy and stuff like that. So
right. I
I
mean, the
think that's great.
survival movement, like one of their top 20 things to buy for your like survival, I don't know, bunker is a materia medica, homeopathic materia medica.
And a kit, and a homeopathic remedy kit.
It is so empowering.
Andre Sane once said to me, he said that if he was comparing, because he's working on this book of epidemics and epidemics and pandemics. So he basically said, if you look at the history of homeopathy, if all medical doctors were poor homeopaths, just poor, not good homeopaths, not even average, just poor, they would raise the level of their communities and their patient and their clientele tremendously just by giving very simple, basic prescriptions to their patients.
Right.
So I see the value of that. I do see the value of that. Just getting that in people's hands, getting them to start working with the remedies, that'll be beneficial, because homeopathy does wondrous things. I mean, it could be from the miraculous to the nothing at all, or just a little bit and then more. So yeah, there's a lot of potential there for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So the challenge homeopathy faces, I had this conversation today, is that oftentimes once the healing occurs, that you forget about it, and that the person doesn't even give credit to the remedy itself.
All the time.
So like, you've got to let go of your ego that needs to take credit for the healing. And I saw this in homeopaths. Like, they would heal a patient and they'd get so proud and want to write it up and like, oh, there's a little notch on my, whatever healing. And then they would have a client that wouldn't do well, and they'd either ignore it, or they feel bad about it, and so you're in this kind of like emotional roller coaster of like, am I helping the person? Am I not helping the person? You know what? The healing isn't about you. And like naturopaths, homeopaths, they're so egotistical so often. I love This Is ND for Truth, because I'm starting to get real here. I'm just like, and it's not about you. It's about the patient and their healing and their choice to heal, and so, they might write you a great testimonial, wonderful, but, don't put your actually, when you're a student, those testimonials and that positivity to build your confidence is a good thing. I'm not saying that you shouldn't try and get the testimonials, to kind of build yourself up a little bit, but healing is about that person and their relationship to the universe, God, and their own vital force. And it shouldn't have to rely on you. And it isn't about you. So the world of homeopathy is rampant with egotistical, I did this, and it's like, no, it's not about you.
Well, I think it's a human thing. I think it's a medical thing. Like, look at our conventional medical, naturopaths, homeopaths. It's very, I did this, instead of like what you said. I agree. And I've had so many cases where it's very obvious to me that the remedy did a lot. But if the patient doesn't see it, I'm not going to force them to see it. But most of the time, I can get them to see it by asking them about their symptoms and did those go away. And what's so weird is exactly what you said before, is that the patient will say they'll forget their pathology. So how are the headaches? What headaches? Have you heard that before? Before?
I mean, it's on many things. And so sometimes you want to remind the person, like, I gave this remedy, it was focused on this, is this still around? And they'll be like, oh yeah, no, I guess it's gone. And it can be frustrating because, and I think this is why homeopaths have a lot of hangups too, because they can have this miraculous healing. They could have decades and decades of helping people. And it's like, nobody cares about it. You're just,
Right.
and you
Right.
want people to care about you, give you some, pat on the back.
Or at least to acknowledge the truth. It
To
doesn't necessarily be,
acknowledge. Yeah.
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 And
But
I've also
I
had
think
like cases
everybody
where,
should have their own miracle healings for themselves.
true.
Everybody needs to be empowered. This is the age of Aquarius. COVID kicked us into that hardcore. What is that about? It's about no more hierarchy, no more like, I know more than you do. It's more like we're equal. We've got the internet. The internet is going to spread all this information and truth out there. We've got podcasts, and
Yes.
so it's the great equalizer. And so, that's why I'm so focused on my school and grassroots homeopathy, because that is as Aquarian as it gets.
That's cool. I agree with you. I do think that this will come into more balance, though, where people will acknowledge those who have greater knowledge and experience than them, even though they have access to that truth. Here's the thing. Before God, we're all equal. Nobody can teach anybody that inner God space because that is inherent. But if you take a given discipline, let's say playing the piano or mathematics or homeopathy, these things have knowledge and they have pieces of experience and pieces of knowledge that some people can excel in and that you could learn from. I think right now what we're having is a big swinging in the opposite direction. And whenever there's a swing of the pendulum, it tends to get out of balance. And that's going to hopefully bring a greater balance where we will trust ourselves. We will know that the truth lives in us, learn to use our intuition, but then also honor and respect the elders, the knowledge they have, and and just basically knowledge base of what we've come to learn from nature. Because there's a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, that is that information. The age of information is the age of Aquarius, and we do have all that knowledge, but it's up to us to kind of give those tools and give them freely sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
better world.
Yes, that's true. That is the desire to get into a better world for sure. I've seen cases where, like what you were talking about before, where a patient will attribute some healing to something else they're doing, for instance, and there you're not going to start wrestling with them. Like they say, well, this happens a lot. Like I ended my relationship. That's why I'm feeling better. But then the question is in brackets to the homeopath and the naturopath is, well, what made you end the relationship? Is that you got a really good remedy. You started feeling good inside. You did what was right for you and you ended what was unhealthy for you. So, I mean, you're right. You got to not be attached to.
Absolutely. And what's more empowering, them saying, I ended the relationship, or thank you, you gave me the right remedy. You have to let go of your ego and be like, you know what? This person feels powerful because they made a choice for themselves and they feel like that's what healed them. Great. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Next patient.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And my name is connected to the angels, and that's what the angels do as well. They don't need to take credit.
Not the good ones. The bad ones, that's exactly what they want, is they want credit. They want to be proud as peacocks. So yeah, I agree. The good ones don't want, they're selfless. They're selfless. They are embodiment of the one. They don't know, they don't have free will. Yeah. So, okay. So Angelic, I could feel the coming together of the talk. And I want to offer you, as I do for everybody that's on, offer the opportunity to share anything that you haven't shared, what's in your heart at the moment, and just give basically a spiel until you feel satisfied.
Wow. Well, this has been quite the podcast. So thank you. I just want to give you my gratitude for doing the work that you do. Your audience being mostly naturopaths. Be proud of your education. It's given you a lot. Find yourself, do your own healing work, listen to the trust within your heart. Every day, you don't need somebody else to, tell you you're a good healer, because you are. It's built into you. I have my book, which you can find on Amazon, Healing Complex Children with Homeopathy.
And I have a link to that on the website as well.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, email me if you're interested in my course. You can find a contact page on my website. And
I could put that up as well if you like. You could send that to me.
yeah, I think that's it. My course has a lot of meditations. I try to create pathways of receiving information that isn't so heady. So I have people really feel into the nature of a substance, or do a meditation, or do their own kind of inner healing work. And it's been really fun. Yeah, I'm committed to naturopaths as well, finding their way with homeopathy, or finding what works for you in your practice. So what heals you will heal others. What breaks your heart in the world is where your service is. What broke my heart were moms and these kids. Specifically to the pandas that I worked on, it was in my family as well. So I think we attract in what we need to heal for ourselves. So
true.
Just love yourselves, take good care of yourselves, prioritize yourselves, and just trust. And you don't need to maybe live by anybody's rule book other than your own internal one.
All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot for being on Angie's The Truth.
Yeah.
I feel like we just scratched the surface. We could probably talk for months on this topic. It's so vast as the cosmos itself. And but thanks for sharing, and thanks for the discussion. We're in very interesting times, and we do have to change some of the places that we've come from, and also honor some of the places that we've come from at the same time. I just wish a lot of good for humanity, and I could sense that you're there too. That's where you're driven by. You're driven by your heart and love and caring for your patients and caring for people. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Yes.
You bet. All right, everybody. Take care. This